I got a question. Why they hating on me? Is it because we got run St. PZ? What is good? Where's my team? Is my team there? Where, is it Carl here? No, not this soon. This can't. What?
What you talking about? Who's Carl?
Oh, thank God. I don't know. You disappeared for a minute. You were there for a while, then you dipped out. What's up, Crack? What's going on over you guys? You guys eating pizza party over there before we go live? I'm not even mad at you guys. You guys are here. So what the fuck? How you guys doing?
Pretty solid. Looking forward to Arlington this weekend. Should be legit.
Just another day on the farm.
Well, you guys been talking up Arlington since the last time you went to Arlington, and the last time I recall, you guys had some pretty solid pickups, and then saw some really cool stories. Either way, I know Arlington's the place to be, according to these two and a bunch of other people. So, Looks like I'll see you in Arlington, motherfucker.
What?
I'll see you guys there, and I'm looking forward to actually meeting Desiree, being with the team for once, and really swooping up anything that's worth swooping in Arlington. I'm pretty stoked.
The Super Bowls.
Speaking of swooping, man, Steven, fucking good call. Ron St. Pierre, guys. This fucking guy is no joke when it comes. I mean, first off, look at his damn thumbnail. Look at this shot. I mean, Steven, we were on the phone talking about how much you're enjoying the lace monitor you have. And then obviously a bell phase, like you guys are obviously working with these
Mm-hmm.
two species of monitors. So I think that thumbnail couldn't go more perfect, for who we have on. But I mean, what are you excited about the most, Steven, with the guests we have on tonight?
I couldn't say one thing in particular. You're talking old school reptile guy, been in the game longer than most people have even been aware of the reptile hobby who are in it today. Somebody people should know about. And, probably one of the best reptile breeders ever with, that lizard specific focus for the most part. I got a lot of monitor questions personally, but and really history, breeding, I mean, we could ask a million questions. So this is why we're doing it.
Yeah, this is definitely why we're doing it. I definitely have some questions on my docket that I'm going to definitely get to tonight with our guests. But before we do that, man, geez, I'm so happy my freezer's full of that www.coldbloodedcafe.com. That's the little day one pinkies all the way to the whale shark rats. Is that whale shark rat?
Whale shark rats.
Coming soon. Hashtag whale shark rats.
Either way, the mammoths are pretty choice. I mean, my bigger snakes are not complaining off the mammoths that they're eating on a bi-weekly schedule. And then obviously you got eggs, put them inside a sim box, www.simcontainer.com. What was the most recent thing you've hatched out of a sim box, Steven, that you could share?
The most recent thing, I think it was the Gastrophilus prasinus, the green keelbelly lizards.
That's pretty sick.
No, actually it was
Blue beauty.
It was Vietnamese blue beauty snakes was actually the most recent thing.
The blue beauties, right?
Hopefully the next thing will be green tree monitors.
Oh my Lord. And all out of a sim box.
All out of a sim box.
Only thing we use.
Mm-hmm. And you think these guys are going to play around? You know what I mean? They're only going to put the best of the best when it comes to hatching, the species that they've been trying to hatch for I don't know how long. I don't know, but it's game time for them, and they're using it in a sim box. So shout out to that. Guess what, guys? It's a lifestyle. It's not only a saying, but it's a lifestyle. This is a lifestyle. Okay, you hear me? This is a lifestyle. We finally got new team shirts. Desiree and Steven, be ready because I got you guys shirts. I got my team.
Thanks, Bubby.
Yeah, how do you guys like it? Now listen, Desiree, you said you wanted one of the originals. I took that in consideration.
No, you didn't.
Yes.
Oh.
See what I'm saying?
Bobby Bubbington?
The original. This is the original of the originals here. This is what me and Forrest created. This is our original Unfiltered Reptiles shirt. And you
Okay,
guys
fuck
both
Bob
gonna
Smith.
Fuck Bob Smith. Yes, it's a lifestyle. Okay, so I'm excited. Arlington's going to be one for the books, just as much as this podcast is going to be one for the books, because this guy's coming straight out of Orlando, Florida, man, and I have this gentleman to bring to the show tonight.
I really want to learn some history on this one. You gotta really get into this book here.
I'm literally announcing the guy, and you just cut me off, Desiree. Like, here I am.
Earlier, how I felt, but whatever.
Ron St. Pierre. Hey, Ron.
How's it going, guys?
Nothing much.
What's up, Ron? Yeah, I'm Desiree.
You deserved a way harder intro. But what's up, Ron? Fresh out of we're excited to have you on, man. We've not had well, actually, I can't say we've not had a legit monitor guest on that. We just had freaking Quetzal on last week, so I guess we're just on a roll, I guess, man. But I don't know, man. Steven, you pretty much called this guy the king of lizards, man. I'm pretty sure that's what came out of your mouth when we were talking about bringing him on. And you know, this guy goes back to the 80s. Is this correct, or how long have you been doing this for now, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, I started breeding reptiles when I was 18, and that was 1986. But by the time I was 20 in 1988, I was really pretty rocking and rolling. So it's been
years.
Yeah, I mean, I dropped out of high school when I was 15 to really do this. So I got to a point where I was just, you know, I knew this is what I wanted to do, and so I've been doing it pretty much ever since. And
back then, when you were just first getting into the game, like what did that look like? What did being, you know, a reptile guy as a profession look like then compared to now?
Well, I mean, back then I was primarily I kind of started catching wild caught invasive species in Florida. I grew up in Miami.
Okay.
And so I discovered that I could catch Cuban anoles, and I could trade them or sell them to the reptile importers for stuff that I wanted. So I started doing that, and I pretty much supplied a huge portion of the night anoles into the pet trade for about 10 years. I harvested somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 a season. And I used that to ultimately get all of the, you know, it gave me access to all these importers' facilities back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I was there when they got shipments in. And that was how I got things like the blood boas and the motley boa and the blue tegus and all that stuff, because I was there at these places, and I was selling them Cuban anoles. So I'd just say, hey, I'll take those and trade them out. And so that gave me pretty good access initially, and after Hurricane Andrew, up until about 92, I was still doing more commercial collecting than breeding. I was still producing things like Burmese pythons and boa constrictors and shit like that, but Andrew wiped out, pretty much flattened Miami. So all of the places that I collected for probably 2 or 3 years were completely decimated. So I had to find another way to make a living, and you know, breeding was definitely the way to go. It's what I really wanted to do anyway. So I just jumped in, and from there it just kept snowballing until where it is now. But yeah, in the mid 80s, it was pretty much, you know, everybody told you, oh, you can't make a living at this. You know, you'll never, this is just, you know, it's kind of like what you tell your kids when they have a garage band, you know, it's never going to amount to anything. And I was like, yeah, well, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing, to be honest. But I really feel like you took advantage of your surroundings and where you're at. You knew that you're in a unique spot, and you could get stuff to leverage your way to go further in the game. And cheers to you on that. That's what it's all about. You know what I mean? But yeah, what a bummer about the hurricane. That's kind of, it just hit me that all happened. I think it was what was it? Late 90s, early 2000s. When
it was 92.
92.
92.
So I was way younger then. Steven wasn't even existing. Not even.
Yeah, that thing was a life changer, man. You went to bed one night and things were a certain way, and then you woke up the next morning and it just changed. It changed Miami forever. A quarter of a million people were left homeless overnight. So
it's terrible. Brutal. So no really heads up on that coming, huh? It was kind of like an overnight type of thing. Damn.
No, that one was supposed to be a tropical storm that was going to be nothing. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even do any kind of preparation for that thing because we get tropical storms all the time and they're nothing.
Right.
And that as the day progressed, I got up in the morning as it got closer and they were saying, oh yeah, it's a category 1 now. And then like an hour later, all the radio stations in Miami were going off. They're like, well, now it's a major hurricane in category 3. And it kept on strengthening even as it made landfall. So it ended up ultimately being a 5 or a high 4. And it skull fucked everything. So it was pretty bad.
That's terrible. I mean, I will think of this though. I mean, like if something happens like that, like why are you still in Florida? Just curious. Like,
yeah, well, I left Miami in 99 and moved to Loxahatchee, which is a little bit north of Miami. And in 2004, I got hit by 3 hurricanes back to back that damn near put me out of business.
Damn.
So I had 250 tegus at the time, and I was trying to make that work. And that was just a disaster on top of a disaster. So
was that Irene?
That was Francis, Jean, and then
Charlie.
I'm sorry?
Charlie? I was
Charlie was
Orlando during those.
Yeah, Charlie was first that year, but it kind of missed where we were, but we still got, outer fringes. But
fucked Orlando.
Yeah. But Gene and Francis came later and they pretty much hit us. I was in like the southwestern quadrant of that. And when I got hit by one and then 30 days later, the second one came, it just wrecked my enclosures. And then 8 months later, Hurricane Wilma came through and passed directly overhead. Yeah. And that just kind of finished the job. So I was like, all right, I'm done. So I sold all the tegus off and moved to really central Florida, a place called Lake Placid, which is on the Lake Wales Ridge, which is probably the only part of Florida that was above the water line, going back 10,000 years ago. So there's a lot of fossils and stuff there, but it's all white sand and dunes and it's high up. So you can do a lot of drier species on there. It's where gopher tortoises naturally live and there's cactus that grow. So it's kind of this weird part of Florida. So it ended up really opening up what was available to me to breed outside. So now I can do, and I still live on that today. I live on the Kissimmee part of it now, which is kind of like, but I still live in a area. I'm sorry?
Disney World.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a really good place to do that kind of stuff. So as long as I stay on the white sand, I can do all kinds of things, whereas if you're in like lower parts of Florida, you're severely limited. So that's why I can do bearded dragons outdoors and lots of Australian stuff.
Now, Ron, before we went live, I asked you, I was kind of talking about your outdoor enclosures, right? So what is the percentage of the animals you have in outdoor enclosures? Are you fully outdoor enclosures with your animals or?
Yeah, I mean, it's about 95%, and the other 5% that isn't fully outdoors is on an indoor-outdoor system that we roll in and roll out depending on the weather. And that's mostly just for really, small babies. So we have a huge building, a 2,000 square foot building that has an equal size pad in front of it, concrete slab. So we just built roll in, roll out, and that way we can keep the babies, a little bit more protected, and it gives you a little bit, easier control over how much they get to eat every day and stuff like that. But once things get to be, a couple of months old, it all goes outside full time. So, like you said, I try to take advantage of what's available, and it just
it works.
Yeah.
When did you start dipping into the bigger species of monitors or lizards? Like, because I know you started collecting in your younger days, what was around you, but like, for instance, like this is nuts. This has never seen this in my entire life. That's Komodo dragon. You know what I mean? This is me and Des, and from what I understand, Des and Steven dream about having a Komodo dragon someday.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, here you are holding them. So, first off, let's talk about this picture real quick. When was this, and how did you get?
I was like 96 at San Diego Zoo. Alan Rapace flew me out to hang out at his place for a week, and he took me over to San Diego Zoo, and my buddy Jeff Lem gave me a full behind the scenes. I was in a room with tons of crested Fiji Island iguanas, and I got photos of that. That was a great trip. So that was it. Jeff took me back to where the Komodos were and let me hold that one and stuff like that. So
in 96, were you keeping big monitors around that time? Like, are you? Yeah.
I'm one of the, not the first, I don't think, but I'm one of the first people to ever breed crocodile monitors in the private sector. And I did it from mid 90s to about the early 2000s.
Cool.
Then I almost got bit in the face by a 9-foot one, and my ex-wife just didn't. She had a fit about it, so I eventually let it go. But that was a tame one, by the way. It was one I had hand-fed forever, and he decided he didn't.
A bad day or what?
I'm sorry?
Having a bad day or something, you think? Or what do you think?
It was during the Daytona show, which I think it was in Orlando back then at the time. But so I had a lot of people over. Usually when that show is, people will call me and say, hey, can I come over and check shit out? And if I know them, I usually let them. And that day I had a bunch of people over. And I was in the enclosure showing off. I was hand feeding it, and he was fine. And I was talking to them, and something freaked him out, and he decided he wanted me out. So I grabbed him just before he bit me in the face. His mouth was open. And yeah, it was a bad day. So, nothing happened to me. Fortunately, I was fast enough that I stopped it, but had he got me that day, it would have been bad. So
jeez.
I have them again, and I'm going to at some point, restart that whole thing. But
Got babies?
No, I have evil monsters.
Okay, that sounds fun.
Yeah, but maybe at some point I'll get them back on. I've been helping various people that are working with them, trying to recall exactly what I did that was successful. And I think I finally narrowed it down, because I tend to, when something doesn't work, I tend to scrap the entire thing, rebuild it all.
Yeah.
I'll do that. I'll iterate over that, like over and over again. And then the crocodile monitors, I got 2.2 adults in 92. And then I spent about 4 or 5 years not really getting anything out of them. I mean, they would lay eggs, but they would just scatter them all over the ground. So I knew there was something up, but I figured it was a nesting problem. But back then I didn't really have a lot of information on New Guinea, and I was stabbing at the dark to see what would work. And I tried a bunch of things. And then one day, and I believe it was Frank Reedus that gave me this idea. He said, they're probably laying their eggs in these giant ferns up in the trees. So he's like, maybe you should put organic material and put it in the trees, right? So I thought, okay, that's a good idea. So I'll try that. So I went and got a huge garbage can, and I packed it full of mulch and, a compost and shit like that. And I mixed it all up, put it in there. And then about a year or two later after that, I had one of them that started laying eggs in this thing.
Wow.
So I never really put it together until recently. So all these years went by, I left things alone. I hatched, for a few years in a row, I hatched clutch here and there. But then I got back into lace monitors last year, and I started doing a lot more research on those. And then kind of kicked me back to looking at the Croc monitors, because lace monitors are termite mound nesters, just a lot of varanids. And, so we have you build the box with the cocoa fiber, and you cut the hole in it, and you pack it in, right? And the monitors will go and lay their eggs in it every time. Works for ackies, works for pretty much everything that'll lay eggs in a termite mound. But I never thought that there were termite mounds in New Guinea. And then I looked into that and discovered there are giant arboreal termite mounds in New Guinea.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so what I had effectively done was make a fake termite mound without really realizing it. And then I've started, since then I've been telling everybody that I know that's working on it. I'm like, look, just build the box that works for the lace monitors and, for the other termite nesters, and it should work. And I know that I think Dallas for DFW Serpentarium, Greg Power works there. I think it's owned by David Spicer, but I think they just used the box, and they did successfully get eggs out of them.
All right.
I know they did get eggs, and I
Wow.
think they did lay them in the box. So the box really is the secret. I mean, it's like that. And I honestly think that a lot of the things that we have problems breeding, in my experience, everybody immediately goes for food as usually or food or temperature. But I think slightly overlooked and probably more important, and as I'm messing around with other species recently, I'm finding it's the case. Nesting is an incredibly important thing. The nesting needs to be available long before they actually grab it, so that the females know they have a suitable site on hand. It may actually go a long way to triggering some of the harder species. And then hydration is another issue that's often overlooked. I think that I've started experimenting pretty hard with night hydration. It's made a huge difference in things that were formerly hard to, like anoles and stuff like that. I no longer water them in the daytime. They're completely watered at night. It's made an enormous difference because most lizards that, and actually this probably applies to snakes too. Arboreal stuff is going to get its water mostly from dew and rainfall. And when you get rainfall, most of the snakes that are heavily arboreal, they basically sit like dew catchers in trees. They tend to have tight packed coils that, and they sit on the parts of the branch. They're not really found on the interior branches for the most part. They go out to the very edges where the dew settles in the leaves and stuff. Yeah. Even fairly heavy animals will do that, particularly in the case of lizards. Lizards come out at night and drink water when the dew settles if they haven't had rainfall. And in the tropics, most rainfall occurs in the late afternoon, early evening. So at night, everything's soaking wet, and they get to spend all night, bringing in the water, keeping it inside, and their body can work it. Whereas if you kind of water them in the daytime and you're blasting them with lights, you're filling a glass that has a hole in it. So you're watering them, but it's being taken right out pretty quickly by the lights. So
it's pretty.
That's kind of the shit I've been, fucking around with, and
I love it. Great at night now.
That's some crucial information for you guys.
Right down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I knew Forrest was working on a lot of Abroni at one time, and if you guys are still doing them, I think that actually they're similar to probably to anoles in that manner, where even though they're from a cloud forest and it's cooler, but I mean, ever since I started watering the anoles at night, it's totally changed the game. I have been struggling with constantly them drying out. I would water them in the morning previously, and then again at like 2:00 in the afternoon. They would always look dehydrated. Yeah. So when I changed to nighttime watering, now I don't do anything in the daytime, and they look solid.
That's amazing.
So
is that kind of like a light bulb for you and for you guys over there? I feel like you guys are waking up in
their settings.
Pretty heavy right here.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, it was a light bulb for me too, and it happened while I was out in a field collecting veil chameleons a couple of years ago down in Fort Myers, and it was a dry night. There were none out. We walked around for hours and couldn't find anything, and then the dew started to settle to 2 a.m., 3 a.m. You started finding chameleons. They were coming out to drink, and brown anoles were emerging that were pretty hunkered down as well, and they were all coming out of the leaves and drinking water. That was at 3 a.m. for diurnal species. So I was like, yeah, this
makes so much sense.
Yeah. And it works for desert species because they get most of their water from the dew. So you can keep them dry. You dry them out in the daytime and you give them a dew cycle at night. With the desert things, I kind of do it like every 2 to 3 days rather than every night. But for the tropical stuff, it's a nightly thing. So
what times are you having the mistings at night?
Because all my stuff is outside for the most part, I just go out there right as the sun goes down, and then I soak everything down. And then, they get a lot of natural dew here too, but I try to, I overcompensate a little bit for the fact that, the anoles are laying an egg every 7 days. So they're constantly taxed. And, but yeah, right about the time the sun goes down, just before I'll go out there and spray everything down. And, I make sure I soak it really good, and then I just leave them alone. When I come back in the morning, it's usually still there's still water in there, and by 9 a.m. or so, it's all burned off, and they're out basking, and then they go about their activity, and then the cycle repeats. So, obviously a lot of times down here it rains, so I don't have to do it when it rains, but it works in the wintertime. The only time I don't do it in the wintertime is if the temperature at night is going to be below 50 degrees, and then I leave them alone. But up until about that point, I'll still, when it's in the 60s or upper 50s, I'll still spray them down and let it go.
So that was kind of a thought that popped in my mind is with the Abronia. Our room is getting sometimes into the upper 40s in like the dead of winter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we would probably be running into issues there if we had like sort of nighttime missing cycle?
See, that I don't know, because I've only messed with Abronia a couple of times, and because it's so hot here, obviously I can't do them outside, and I never, air conditioned spaces are at a premium, so I never really put that into them. But the thing, when you look at things like Boland's pythons, they occur in a place where it's 45 or 50 degrees and pouring down rain. Now they are, up in dry spots, but if it's always like that and it's 45 or 50 degrees, I have to believe they go out and are exposed to that kind of cold, and it probably doesn't affect them even with the cold rain.
Yeah.
So Abronia are probably similar. So, but I would tread lightly on that. Obviously, it's one of those things that, if I were you and I had them, I absolutely would experiment at least with a few of them and see what happens.
Yeah.
Charge it to the game.
Yeah. I do a lot of experimenting, and most of the time it's rarely ever bit me in the ass. And most of the time, as long as you're cautious about it, you can reverse anything that as soon as something starts to go wrong, you should know. And then you'll be like, okay, I just need to turn the dial back the other way and stop it. Most things are much tougher than we make them out to be.
Yeah.
That's true.
So it's not like they're in bubbles.
Who were like your early mentors when you were first getting going, and some of the guys that are still around today that you were doing business with or friends with, or just like?
I grew up with most of those Miami guys. When I was 15, I used to work for a guy named Ed Chapman, who owned Florida Reptile Importers, which he's not really in the business anymore, but he was probably a big open window for me, because that was when I really got to see all the stuff that was coming in. I had giant red tails, and I got my first red tegus that way and stuff like that. The guys around today, I know them all. I know Tommy Crutchfield, and trying to think of who's left. Who's still?
Did you take some of your stuff to Strictly?
Oh yeah, me and those guys.
A big outlet for you.
I'm sorry.
I said I assume they were a big outlet for you back then.
I was actually there almost every day.
I bet, yeah.
I lived in Miami. Yeah, Mike and Ray and all them, we go way back. And
yeah,
Mike and I are the same age, so we kind of grew up at the same time in that Miami area. And he was doing Strictly, and I was collecting and buying everything cool that he brought in. And I used to go through his ball python shipments and pull out, weird shit and then sell it to people like Greg Graziani and all those other guys, and Kevin.
Hey, Ron, I have to ask, because I've heard this, through rumors. I didn't grow up in Miami during the 80s. I was barely born in 85. But if you were, in the animal game or export game or whatever, was that really closely related to like the drug dealers down in Miami? Like, did that have almost a relationship in a way where like it almost went hand in hand, or what was your experience with that?
Yeah, that is the case, man. It's kind of like NASCAR was built on moonshining. The reptile industry was kind of built on cocaine smuggling. There's there is truth to that. Most of those old school guys were. One of my primary places that I used to sell to was a place called Zoological Imports that was owned by Mario Tabreau, who's apparently was the model for the movie Scarface. And Mario was always cool with me. He bought everything I brought in, and I was like 15 or 16 at the time, and I was catching all these iguanas and Cuban anoles and all this shit. I would take it over there, and most of the time I wouldn't get a check. I'd end up bouncing out of there with some other thing I
Trade.
I rarely got paid. I mostly ended up with more animals, but
That's just how it goes.
Yeah, man, I got rodent trade.
Right.
I know.
That's how it works.
Just as good as money. You can't say no to that.
Yep. But it. I mean, it was. Yeah, I saw a lot of interesting things, and I can't even remember most of the shit that went on. It was just so crazy for most of those years.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because being at the facilities all the time, like animal-wise, what were some of the craziest things you saw that someone today wouldn't see going to those places?
I remember, cattle troughs full of giant sun gazers, cattle troughs full of shingleback skinks, and I had a ton of shingleback skinks at one time, but everybody, back then, no one really cared. They were like, oh, they have one baby, and they were worth like $300-400 a piece, and they were. I mean, I regret not. I always thought they were cool, and I really should have held on to those. But I had Taliqua multifasciata back then, which you can't really find anymore. I wish they were still around, and I mean, there's so much stuff. It's so different now, and it's continuing to evaporate. Which is one of the things that I'm doing, and probably the primary thing that Heather and I have tried to do since we moved out here, is we're trying to set up as many species as we can that we feel either will vanish or are on the verge of disappearing.
Awesome.
Then trying to set up like real colonies to maintain and hopefully get other people to do the same thing.
Yeah.
The world's got enough, bearded dragon and ball python breeders. It really doesn't need any more.
Yeah.
So, people need to, the people that can, that have the ability or the space need to try to, keep some of the other hobby stuff going. And to be honest, that stuff is more profitable than it's ever been. So it's kind of, you're actually in a position now where it actually does make sense to go ahead and do that. I mean, obviously that is not the reason we're doing this. And that's never been my motivation. I'm at this now like 32 years or something, and I've really never made any money. I've made a living, but I've never made any money really. So, and I'm totally happy with that. But a lot of that's my own damn fault, because I tend to go after things that not everybody else is doing to try to find new stuff. And that generally is expensive to do. And it usually doesn't result in, like if I was cranking out high-end ball pythons, that's.
Well, another thing, Ron, real quick. I mean, you grew up you were from a glory days where there was no social media. You know what I mean? Like anyone who's making good money off reptiles, period, has the social media leverage. They have there's some sort of big entity helping them with that boost. Obviously, with their customers that come and spend good amount of money for ball pythons, whatever it is that they're selling. So I don't know, man. I feel like you have it now. You know what I mean? And you're pretty reputable. Like you are actually pretty reputable. You are reputable. Like you have some legendary stuff. We just we need like Carl to go out to his place and really take some notes and and put the word out. You know what I mean? Carl's our he's another member of our team, and
he's our conservation specialist who isn't here at the moment.
Right.
He comes at some point, but anyways, I feel like, but this is a really good point what you're saying here, Ron, because people do at the end of the day want to have an animal that they love, but for instance, for a good reason, and the reasons why you're doing what you're doing makes more reasons than anything, because it's creating longevity for a species that technically almost doesn't have anything going for them right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I expect that anole thing to be a pretty profitable thing down the road. I think I'm right on the verge of pushing that into more of a mainstream based on how many people, and I have all these morphs now that I'm working out. If I get the piebald one that I have to, if that does produce, then we'll have 2 different strains of albino. We'll have piebalds. We've got, I think we finally found a genetic blue. We've got, I've got a whole bunch of different rare species of giant anoles. That one of them I'm working with Philippe de Vaugelet on trying to establish it. it's been teetering around in the U.S. here and there in small numbers, but people kept, they either died on them or they were unsuccessful breeding them. And I finally figured out how to really get them to go. So now I'm cranking them out. And so Philippe sent me, he and I had maybe what we think might be the last 6 adults in the U.S. Now we have 26 of them or so. And I'm getting eggs every day. So that'll be established before another year, and I'll have 20 pairs of those breeding, and I'll get them in other hands.
Which anole species is this?
That's Anolis lutigularis. It's the western giant anole.
Huh.
Is there a anole species, Baker eye? Or Baxter eye or
there
something?
might be. I mean, there's so many. There's like hundreds.
Yeah, we had a pair of those at one point, our supposed pair. Maybe it was just one. Do you remember that?
I think so.
Yeah. I don't think we kept it right because it didn't make it, but never had an anole before.
Anoles can be tricky, but the main reason I focused on the crown giants is they're basically virtually identical to the Rhacodactylus geckos, minus needing UV lights. But I mean, they eat the same things, they inhabit the same basic ecological niches, so they're super simple. They eat rapaceae. They'll eat a lot of fruit. They eat a lot of, they're just very easy. You set them up in pairs and they do great. And the downside of them is their egg laying is kind of a pain in the ass. They lay 1 egg every 7 days. And so getting them to lay was a little bit tricky. But I finally figured out a system for that works too. So I'm going to eventually, once I start selling them, I'm going to really publish all this stuff and get it out there so people see, oh yeah, look, there's a simple formula and you can do this and anybody can be successful. I need a lot of people to be successful so that eventually they become, it keeps chaining off of each other.
Now, Des and Steven, you guys at some point want to breed croc monitors, right? Like that's
Yeah.
cool.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm very curious on how, Ron, you successfully did that. What you said, mid-90s, you were successfully breeding croc monitors, and just getting into croc monitors, right? Like, let's talk about that. That era for you, because not every day someone gets into that, right? So how did that land into your lap? And let's talk about you successfully getting into breeding with them.
Basically, my rat supplier was a guy named Gary Baylock who lived in West Palm. Okay. And he had purchased a pair of lace monitors and 2 pairs of croc monitors from Pet Farm, adults. He had them for years. He never got them to breed. And one day I went to his house to pick up a truckload of rodents. And he was like, hey, yeah, man. And we were looking at him. He's like, yeah, man, I'm going to sell them all. And I think he wanted like $5,700 for the pair of lace. And he wanted $4,000 for the 4 Crocs. And I was looking at that and I was like, I can get 4 Crocs for $4,000. I could only afford one or the other. So I ended up taking the Crocs. So I brought them home. I set them up. And one of the things that I felt like, and I still do, I think a lot of the reason people are not successful with crocodile monitors is because the introduction for those is brutal. So once you get a pair that lives together, I feel like separating them is a bad idea, because then you essentially end up having to reset the whole thing every time you want to breed them. So once I got pairs, I went through the trials to get the pairs situated. And once I got them together, I never split them up. And that ultimately worked to my advantage. Now, that is the same method that I use pretty much for everything. I maintain everything in pairs year round, unless they're beating the hell out of each other, and then I will split them. But otherwise, everything we work with, every species. And I don't even know how many I've done. I mean, I've produced well over 100 species.
At what age do you house them together? As adults, or
it depends. It depends on when I get them. I mean, the best case scenario is to do it when they're small. Like that works really well for blue tongues and all that. I generally try to raise the blue. I try to take a good guess. We have a lot of blue tongues, and I try to take a decent guess when they're really little and hope that I get it right. But what I'll do in those cases generally is I'll raise 6 of them together in a big outdoor enclosures. And then as they grow up and they're easier to sex, then I split them. And eventually they get down to just a pair in every enclosure. And they're not beating each other up. I mean, I can't even think of any instance of aggression with any of the blue tongues over the last 2 or 3 years. And I do that with the Varanids too. And it works really well. But if you only have access to big stuff, you can do it with adults. You just have to supervise generally. And if the problem with the Croc monitors is they can do a lot of damage very quickly. So it's
like to each other, not only to you, right? Like
I'm speaking about to each other. Yeah, for me, I have big Kevlar gloves that I use, and so I don't worry about them anymore. If I have to deal with that, they're not gonna get through the Kevlar.
What kind of gloves do you guys have, Des and Steven?
Not ones that are good enough at the moment. But
come on, guys, let's get on that, please.
Like some big welding gloves that
those work.
For how big they are right now.
That's why. Yeah, everything.
Think ahead. They're going to grow quick. We all know this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the good thing is if you have them young, they'll be nice and tame by the time they're adults. Yeah. They're a lot easier to manage then.
One of the Crocs is very, very mild mannered, and used to interaction. Just the smallest one, she was and is no longer.
She'll get back to it.
So, but you do the whole like put your hand up to them thing, and when you see those pupils dilating and they're twitching their head, I'm like, all right, I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna head out.
Yeah, like I like my fingers. I'm too young to lose one.
Yeah. Oh, the first one I ever hatched. I was so excited that I hatched this damn thing that I ripped the box open on the lid open on the container, and I just reached in and grabbed it. And it was slippery because it had yolk all over it, and it slid out of my finger a little bit. It turned around and bit my forefinger, and it just pulled back. It was a very fast, very light bite. I didn't even feel any pressure, and it looked like you took razor blades and split me from one end to the other.
That was an egg.
That was a valuable lesson.
Fresh
so after that, I was much more.
Okay, so wait, how does the food thing go when you're housing multiples? Like, are you tongue feeding? Do you separate for feeding, or like make sure both sides are?
Yeah, you have to target feed Varanids, otherwise the males they'll consume too much, and once. It's pretty much the same for all lizards. If the males get too heavy, they're done. They don't.
Yeah, I noticed that with Macrae. Like the male is just crazy.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can't ever get the female enough food. So do you like get the male his food first and then focus on the female so he's like distracted and?
I mean, you can do that, and for super hyper aggressive.
Two tongue feeding, like.
No.
But
what you're talking about. Hyper, I can't do the dual wielding tong thing. It just doesn't work for me. But yeah, generally it ends up with both in that situation. But hyper aggressive males, I'll take a small prey item, usually a thawed chick, and I'll throw it as far away as I can in the corner.
Okay.
He goes off and chases it, and then I try to quickly stuff the female with as much as she'll eat.
Gotcha.
But recently I kind of changed things. And what I started doing with the lace monitors is I feed the female first. And when the male comes over to try to steal something, I put the tongs underneath his chin just to stop him. And I started doing this over and over again. And when he stops, then I'll hand him a piece of food. And now I've got it to the point where I can put on 2 of the pairs, I can put the tongs under their throat, the male's dead stop, and sit and wait until I finish with that female, because they know when I'm done, then I'll give them something. If they don't do if they try to get past it, I don't feed them.
Yeah.
And then obviously
it's worked. I mean, it's been. I was surprised. They're super intelligent, at least with variants.
Yeah.
Man, I could just tell how intelligent they are just with watching you guys' stories, man. Like it's no joke.
What's your same diet like with Croc monitors? Are you mostly one thing or the other, or a lot of variation?
No, when I was breeding the Crocs, I only had access to rats, so I pretty much fed them exclusively rats.
Yeah.
These days I use a lot of chicks, and I use both chicks and rats.
Okay.
And mice, and depending on the size, and
right.
And a lot of chicken eggs. Chicken eggs are actually pretty good, and I'll generally use chicken eggs pretty heavy when I want to push one into breeding cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's, although the new Crocs that I have here, they don't really want to eat chicken eggs. I don't know what the hell's up with that, but no. The lace and the capes and all that stuff, they'll really pound them. So, I don't know, but for the Salvador, I'm fairly certain that pretty much all they mostly eat where they come from are those. There's a whole bunch of different tree rodents and where they're found, arboreal rodents, and I would imagine the way they recognize that particular prey item is pretty. Even wild caught ones, straight out of the wild, will immediately recognize a rat and pound it. So that's more than likely their primary diet. Although there is some indication they may eat fruit, so there's some of that too. So,
now, if you could go back and change it, would you take them off of all rodent diet? Would you switch it up back then if you could?
On the Croc monitors?
Yeah.
No, I think it's fine. I think most of these large predators, they're fine on a typical snake diet. So, I think if you have access to rodents, you can use rodents. If you have access to chicks, you can use chicks. The lace are a little smaller, and they have a little bit of a harder time, the females anyway, getting the rats down unless they're small enough. And so the chicks just seem to go down easier and faster.
Right.
And some of them, for whatever reason, the lace monitors seem to prefer chicks over rodents. So I kind of leaning in that direction right now. And the Mertens monitors destroy little chicks like crazy. So that's been kind of nice.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Species you listed, I think we have like 500 questions.
Oh, I know, right?
But before any of that, I'm guessing you don't really put a whole lot of stake into the whole idea of variety of diet leading to better success or healthier animals or whatever. Well,
no, I actually do on most things. Like the owls we feed a ridiculous, a ridiculous amount of things. They get roaches and hornworms and superworms and black soldier fly larvae and rapashi and fresh fruit. And
wow.
The amount of things that I cycle through. We do the same thing with like tegus. Tegus we feed we had to get rid of them all thanks to the ban, but we up until this point, we were feeding them primarily fruit with maybe a much lesser emphasis on meat because, the studies that have come out of their area and my own personal experience with them, I noticed that basically over the years of working on tegus, after 3 years, you're done. They don't breed anymore. And it's kind of like an unspoken thing that most of the other breeders have eventually realized. 3 or 4 years, then they're kind of done. They just stop. And I think that's in large part to one, the males are generally too heavy. Everybody with tegus, they keep them in pairs or they feed the males too much. And it's very difficult to target feed a tegu. They're just especially when they're outdoors and they're breeders, they're just psycho. No matter they're just crazy. And but I also think that the diet, based on what I've seen from wild sources, was woefully inadequate. They should probably have never been fed rodents at all, and probably given primarily, maybe some chicks and some eggs and stuff like that, but really a lot of fruit. And since I've raised up animals recently on they look more like wild type. The males were lean and mean and muscular, and the females were the right amount of heaviness that you would expect, but still, very muscular and mean and lean. And that was mostly raised on fruit. So I really think the way we looked at tegus previously was they were like the South American monitor. But what I really think is they're actually the South American blue-tongued skink, that they just kind of waddle around on the ground, eating whatever they can find, insects, a lot of fruit when there's fruit-bearing tree, and they all seem to be found heavily in the vicinity of that. So yeah. So I mean, I advocate for a wide range of diet for a lot of things, but for the varanids, just like a snake, I think in that situation, I think you can go with one or the other or mix it up. I just don't think it's going to hurt either way.
Okay.
Now, maybe for the Mertens, that's a different story because they're aquatic and they probably get a lot of crustaceans and fish and stuff like that. So and for those, I do rotate a whole bunch of different things.
Okay. Let's kind of dig into that more. We're actually in the next week or so acquiring an adult pair. What's your feeding regimen for your Mertens monitors?
For the Mertens?
Yeah.
Oh, so right now I've been using I've been using the Missouri crocodile diet.
Okay.
Ooh,
which I've had to mix with fish flavored cat food to get them to eat it pretty heavily. But man, once they learn how to eat it, they destroy it. Huh. So I've been using that. My assumption with that is, it's formulated for crocodiles. They're kind of similar, in that way. They're, and then I feed them chicks. We feed them mice. I'm actually working on a supply of fish, and I'm going to add crayfish and shrimp to their diet, which I've got a guy right now trying to find me a decent source for, cheap, basically bait shrimp and stuff like that, frozen bait shrimp. I think with those, the main thing is to have a very large area of water for them, because they do most of their breeding and everything in the water.
Yeah.
So that and a varied diet is probably. I've been getting a lot of eggs. The ones I have 5 adults, 2.3 adults that we picked up about 6 months ago, and they've been laying eggs, but they've been infertile. Nice thing about those is they do lay in the termite mound box, so it's super easy. Just pop that in there. They go in every time. They lay 3 to 7 fairly large eggs for such a small lizard, to be honest. So, and I think with those, I think they're very generalist feeders. Pretty much anything they would probably come across on a riverbed is, riverbank is probably, or, in the shallow part of the water. Because apparently from what the videos and stuff I've seen, they come out early in the morning, they go straight into the water, they spend large amount of time swimming around doing most of their activity there. And then they climb up on the banks and, try to burn off what they've eaten.
That's so sick. I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see when you guys have those, dude. I really can't.
Yeah, they're badass. They're definitely fun. They're like having a scaly otter.
Yeah, there was some babies at the NARBC in St. Louis a couple weekends ago, and I was just fascinated by those little tiny babies.
Yeah, that's probably Mike Stefani's.
It is.
Yeah,
monitors. I want him on the show. He is funny guy. Wow.
They had those. They were around in the 90s, and then they disappeared. I actually had a group of them back then.
Yeah.
And then they're one of those cases of one of those things that just vanished, and then they were gone. Then a few came in, and Mike got them and set them up, and he's been pretty successful with them. So
yeah, I love his setups too.
Yeah.
Those
He's got
barrels.
Yeah. I haven't actually seen that in person because
God, it was incredible. That's how I had the baby set up at the show.
So they're a good thing, and I think it's a good thing that he got them going. Hopefully, we'll get them going at some point, and you guys will get them going. And they, as long as we can get them back to being more of a, you need about 10 people really that are successful with something to kind of keep it out there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can look at Australian water dragons. Bert Langerwerf was the primary guy. He was producing, 400 or 500 of those a year or more. He passed away, and then they almost disappeared completely. And then, they're starting to make a comeback now because a couple people have picked them up and started breeding them again. But that was an animal that was producing fairly substantial numbers every year by one guy, and him disappearing. they almost vanished. And it was pretty quick too, because 3 or 4 years after he passed away, they were virtually gone.
Wow.
So, you know, it's like that with all this stuff. So,
Ron, I love monitors and stuff. Don't get me wrong. I just don't keep them. Unfortunately, I'm not as gangster as Steven and Dez. So I'm a snake guy, man. So I want to know, you know, what are some sick ass snakes that you worked with, or some really awesome projects you did that you're proud of that you could talk about real quick? Because obviously, you know, this is a gnarly ass boa that even to this day, if you have your hands on a boa like that, it's amazing. And this is, I'm assuming this in the 90s. I'm assuming with that shirt. I'm just trying to see.
That's actually 2001, and that's the original Motley boa.
The original Motley boa.
Yeah, I bought that in 1999 at Strictly Reptiles. I traded Cuban and Ulls for it. That's actually the first baby. So I produced it. That's the first one I produced. So I bought the original one. I traded some Night and Ulls, brought it home. And the reason I bought it, oddly enough, was that thing had sat in Strictly Reptiles for years. Like, they had it on their list as a bizarre boa. And nobody bought it. Everybody looked at it and said, "Oh, it's not genetic. It's just some weird thing." But I had a friend of mine asked me to go and pick up some Motley corn snakes for him. Mm-hmm. And the day that I went to get those, they had the Motley corn snakes in a box underneath the Motley boa. And I pulled the corn snake thing out to pick them up, and I'm like, "Holy shit! This has the same pattern and the same kind of side thing going on that the boa had." So I was like, this has got to be the same thing. So I said, fuck it. So I went over back to the office, and I talked to Mike about it, and we ended up coming to a deal. I was like, yeah, I'll give you 300 Cuban and Ulls for it over the next week. And so I took it, and a year later, I bred it to just a normal female that I had sitting around, and about half the babies came out Motley boas. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that was in '98, because I sold the project at that point to Jeremy Stone, because my ex-wife and I were trying to buy a house at the time, and since we were self-employed, it was really hard to get a mortgage. Yeah, loan. So I had to come up with 50% of the down payment. So I sold the Motley boa collection, the caramel albino, ball python that I had. I had like the second or third one ever brought in. I got enough to pretty much get out and then set up the new farm. So that's why I'm selling that. And then, you know, going back to 92, I mean, I found the original blood boas in a bag and paid like $50 a piece for them, and went on to produce those.
So like Sumatrons, or like what kind? They're just like regular blood pythons, or what they look like?
No, it was the boa constrictor, the blood boa, the red one.
Oh, blood boas. Okay, I think you meant bloods. I was thinking like bloods, like blood pythons or some stupid.
The blood boa, yeah. The original blood boas came from us. We found them. I went through a shipment of El Salvador boas.
Oh wow!
And found 2.2 blood boas in one of the bags. I found 3 black-tailed anathoristic boas that were, as far as I know, the first El Salvador ones ever. And then I also found 3 boas that I believe were T-positive albinos, but I didn't really know it at the time. And I had baked all of this, and then I had a patternless one. And over the years, when I was producing just normal hets from the blood boas, I would use the patternless boa, I would use the anathoristics, I would use the possible T positives, and I never told anybody about those. I just said, look, these are het blood boas, and I would sell them as that. Mm-hmm. So you flash forward like 20 years later, and that was at I don't remember where it was. I think it was at one of the Tinleys, and Vin Russo comes over to me. He shows me a photo of these patternless boas that are popping out of his blood boas. He's like, you know how this is happening? And I was like, oh, well, let me tell you something. By the way, 20 years ago, I baked these into some of the hets that I sold to people, and I think now you've successfully
bred them back.
Yeah. And so, and over the years, people have gotten weird shit, and it's come back. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that looks like this thing. And then I'll dig up a photo and send it to them. And they're like, oh, yeah, there it is.
I get so excited because that shit's bound to happen again. Like, you know, for instance, with all the scrubs you're working with, fucking Steven, like, I'm surprised. I'm not mad that you're going to keep back all 11 fucking new hatch.
Cute.
You never know. You never know. One of those could be albino or some shit. You
It
never
doesn't
know.
look like it, but that'd be
Yeah. I mean, all the blue tegus come. I'm the one who founded those, and I got 2.3 imported ones back in '95, and by '97 I was breeding them. And the first time in '99 or 2000, when I actually bred the babies back together, I popped out albinos. I mean, what are the odds of that? You know, I mean, there was only a couple of blue tegus ever brought in, and then they had one of them. At least one of them happened to be het for albino. It was just like. I was shocked, and the funny thing was I used to joke to people all the time, especially to my ex-wife at the time. Every time tegus would hatch, I'm like, "There's an albino tegu in there." So I cried wolf plenty of times, and then the day it actually happened, she didn't believe me, and I was screaming. I'm like, "There's a fucking albino tegu in this box," and then she came walking out, and looked, and there was this bright pink tegu sitting in there. Couldn't believe it. So. It does happen. I personally don't think that mutations are as rare as we think they are. I think they just, they get eaten in the wild pretty quick because they don't have the camouflage. And
Yeah.
You just have to look once a species in captivity reaches a certain level of production, spread out amongst all of us, all of a sudden the mutations really start to pop out. It goes along for years. There's hardly anything. And then all of a sudden you get one, and then one turns to 3. As soon as people start intentionally breeding hets together, then you really start seeing the mutations because all that hidden stuff that's in there starts to come out. And so, I expect crested geckos to blow up here in another couple years. They have 2 now, and I think we'll see 2 turn into 5 or 10 pretty fast. So,
Steven, you have crested geckos, right? Am I tripping?
Did.
You have leopard geckos.
Yeah, had leopards. Yeah, no geckos. A handful, like Australian.
yeah.
Wait, you got rid of all your leopard geckos? All of them are gone?
Mm-hmm.
How
Yeah.
do you feel about that?
One.
We got laces, so I think it was totally worth it. The lace monitors. So
Touche.
yeah, it's like, well, I can have these hundreds of leopard geckos or these 2 lace monitors.
Yep.
And call it a day.
2 lace monitors.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. I mean, I do some crested geckos. We do the very high end morphs, the axanthic and the lily white.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, we do those because that's basically how you pay your bills. I could take them or leave them. If somebody offered me a good enough trade tomorrow, they'd probably go.
Yeah.
But yeah, the lace monitors and stuff like that, man. That's what you do this shit for, stuff like that.
Yeah. So let's get into it. So
Tab on that.
yeah, let's talk about lace monitors. What's your history with them? What are you working with now? And just educate.
Yeah. So right now I have I recently acquired 2. Well, I didn't, but I have investors. So my investors recently acquired for me 2 different large collections. So I have a group. I have 7 adult lace monitors and 7 adult Spencer eye. And so we've got.
How much more for that?
So
I got rodents too.
I'm working on both of those simultaneously. I'm fairly certain I'm going to be getting lace eggs soon. I've got ones that are going through all. They're enormous. They're gravid as hell. 2 of them can barely walk, and they've been digging. So I expect any day that I'll have some eggs out of those. But monitors can throw a monkey wrench when you think everything's working. So I don't know, but I do. So I basically all these things we acquired over the last year or so. I'm hoping that the Spencers will go in the spring. They're right now getting ready to hibernate or brumate or whatever you want to call it. And the lace are in full breeding mode at the moment. They're breeding like crazy, and but yeah, they're for me, the Bell's Phase lace was like the holy grail thing. Other than a Komodo dragon, that was probably the only other thing that I really wanted. And now I've got 4 bells and 3 normal ones, and they're all gigantic. And
so having both, how do you think the bells it like relates genetically. I've heard people think it's recessive or just pops up here and there. Maybe it's like a polygenic thing. What are your thoughts on the genetic link of the Bell's phase?
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to call anything because I don't have personal experience, and just like you said, man, there's just everybody kind of takes a stab at the dark, you know. But from reliable people that I know down in Australia, the general consensus that I've gotten seems to be is that it's just like a naturally occurring dominant mutation.
Mm-hmm.
You have one, they breed, about half of them come out that way. Most of them, I've heard the rumors of the super bells and stuff like that, but the people that I've talked to in Australia that I consider to be credible seem to think that's not really the case, and it's just a case of, you know, people breed two bells together and get like a really pretty one and think,
like a line-bred Bell's, not necessarily a homozygous.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you can look at the history of the hobby, and there's lots of instances of stuff like that where, you know, you got some kind of line-bred trait going on top of morph building, and people kind of take it, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is. I mean, it could be just a simple, you know, polygenic thing. I am definitely going to breed. I have two very, very good Bells, male and female, that I'm going to eventually breed together to see what happens. But right now I'm doing normals to single Bells.
Sure.
Nice.
But
so have you got clutches yet or not yet?
No, I mean, I got one infertile clutch about a month ago. And but now they're definitely
like termite mound thing for nesting.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. You know, it's just a tough tote pack. I mean, the thing I see a lot of people that try to copy the termite mound but don't do it correctly because they think it's just a box with cocoa fiber in it, or they add things like sand to it and stuff. But the real trick is that it's got to be absolutely packed. You have to fill the box more actually above the lid, actually above the rim, and then press everything down so it's super, super compact and tight. The only way the female can get in there is to actually dig into it. And it seems to make the difference. And I've been using this with Ackies too, and it works really well. And so pretty much anything that termite nests in the wild, it does successfully mimic a termite mound. It's a hard-shelled, enclosed thing with organic material inside. And it was developed by David Kirshner down in Australia, who's a biologist, a zoo guy. And it's genius. It's absolutely a game changer.
For our boreal monitors, you just replicating that, just elevated, essentially?
No, actually, you can have them on the ground. I mean, a lot of those things, I mean, you know, if I was doing green trees and stuff, I'd probably have one up high and one down low just to give them options.
Sure.
Stuff that tends to be on the ground, though, tends to be a little more stable in temperature, where if you have a box that's elevated, the temperature might be a little bit, you know, and then it may not find the perfect temperature. So there's things like that. You want to shoot for like an 86 degree, basically the bottom of the thing. So when it digs down, it finds an 86 degree chamber, and then it lays its eggs, and you're good. So, but yeah, I mean, pretty much any of the termite nesters. I was going to test it on tegus because tegus also lay in termite mounds, and I have a feeling that it's probably it may actually solve some of the issues with reliably breeding tegus, because normally none of us, including myself, supply them with any sort of nesting material. They just dam up all of their substrate and make a nest, and then they lay their eggs on the top. But what I think they're doing is they're trying to mimic as best they can the termite mound. And so it's probably, if you probably gave them that box, it may actually result in way, way more reliable tegu breeding. So I don't know. I'm just throwing shit at the wall right now. There's all kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
How far are you guys from that? From like the whole breeding thing, Kush?
The male
with what?
The lace.
Like the lace breeding, yeah, like that project. How far are you from that?
6 months to a year. About really, the female's ready. It's just the male.
Yeah.
Waiting for him to get more size on him.
The males grow super quick too. Once they hit a certain size, they just explode.
Yeah. So, yeah, he eats and eats and eats. So yeah, we're feeding him.
Do you think it's best with males at a certain age for maturity for breeding or size?
That's a controversial subject, and I'll tell you exactly how I always approached it. There are people that put arbitrary ideas. Humans will say, "Oh, don't do it before X amount of years, X amount of grams, whatever." But from my experience collecting stuff in the wild, that's not actually how it works. And when I would collect iguanas, green iguanas, for instance, every year most of the females that were right around 30, 36 inches long, which is fairly small for an iguana, they were all gravid. So I just, like I said, I maintain everything in pairs, and when it goes, it goes. But from my experience, nearly all lizards will successfully reproduce at right around a year of age. And I actually just went through this with my buddy Eddie Soto. He produces those serrated cone heads.
Oh yeah, we have some of those too.
Yeah, so
things eat.
Yeah, I love those.
Teach us, please. They do nothing.
It's so useless. I tried to sell them. They didn't sell.
I don't really like those things. I mean, they kind of sit around.
I just don't even know how we got them, why we got them, and I don't know what they do. I'm being truthful here, guys.
Oh my gosh, they're super cool.
They're fucking weird. They're like legs above their head half the time. You're like, what the fuck are you even doing? Like, how do you get in that position? It's like lizard yoga.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Anyway, so serrated conehead lizards.
The good thing about them is they do sell really well. There's a lot of people that really dig them, and they're super easy. I mean, but like you said, they just kind of sit there and they don't really do a whole hell of a lot. Mm-hmm. But Eddie's been pretty successfully producing them, and he was like, so Heather wanted some of those, so we bought 10 of them last year, and he's like, you're never going to breed them before they're 2 years old. And I was like, okay, we'll see. So let's just see what happens. So 10 months later, we started getting eggs.
Wow.
And I'm never going to doubt you.
You guys have two of the same. Their size differences are huge, though.
The females are big. The males are small.
Interesting. Okay. And what do they eat besides crickets?
That's all we feed them basically is crickets, mealworms. They're insectivorous.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of rain, a lot of water to trigger them to breed. That's probably one of the reasons that.
More of that.
And I mean a lot of water. Like it rains here pretty much every day in Florida from about May onward, but ours actually don't breed until like August or September when we're getting like deluges.
Okay.
So, and then all of a sudden they start breeding and laying eggs. So it seems like it takes a lot of water to kick them in.
Like misting over water bowls or both, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would I would probably actually see if I was I'll be perfectly honest. If I was keeping reptiles indoors, I mean, things like anoles and abronia and the coneheads, anything arboreal that lives in kind of a tropical, or subtropical area, I would do them all in rain chambers, and I would keep them in rain chambers. And when I say that by rain chambers, I use basically these utility sinks, the white ones they sell at any Home Depot. Then I build a cage on top of it. And what that allows me to do is if I have to do the stuff indoors in the wintertime, say it's too cold, I can soak them. I can put a soaker hose on them and run it for an hour and simulate rain.
I got a kitten that needs that.
And it makes a big difference. I mean, you just cannot get enough water just by misting. It just doesn't work, no matter how much you do it. And when you do it intermittently, it gets them enough to keep them alive, but it never really. It's not the same as like being exposed to a major rain event on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So hydration is probably one of the most important but overlooked things. And I've been, like I said, the last 5 or 6 years. I've been going back over because I did all the same things everybody does, and so I started experimenting. And most people, a lot of people are afraid to experiment, and rightfully so. I mean, it's risky. Yeah. But once I started to mess around with the water and stuff, I found that it's pretty much a net plus.
Yeah.
What did you guys find, Des and Steve, that was like kind of good about keeping the animals, like the monitors you had outside? Because they were outside for a minute. Right now they're inside, or have them outside?
They're inside now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the reaction for that, you think, for them to be outside versus keeping them inside?
Well, I mean, I think obviously it's better, and at least from my perspective, they seem to have a much more natural behavior pattern over the course of the day, just reacting with just the change of where the sun is positioned and the temperature. Like, early in the morning they weren't out; it was still warming up, and then by noon or 1, they're all out basking, and it just seemed like they were acting much more naturally, and they were more aggressive with food.
Yep.
I think overall it was just the way to do it. But
agree.
we're in Indiana, so we can't drag you around. But yeah, it was amazing. I loved it for the short time we were doing it, and they'll be back out there in the spring, summer. So
yeah, I mean, if I lived in a cold climate, that's pretty much what I would do. I would, when the weather was conducive for it, I'd try to get them outside, because even a little bit is going to be beneficial, I think.
Yeah.
It's really hard to beat the sun. And,
yeah.
We have pretty good lights these days, and some of, it does work for indoor stuff, but I mean, if you can actually, do the outdoor thing, then it helps you out a lot. I'm just, fortunate that I live down here, and, but any of the southern states can pull it off. So, it's a net plus, especially for like the lace monitors and stuff. They really they do a lot of cool shit when they have a big cage that they can really move around in, and they, like you said, they react to the movements of the sun and the positions, and it's ours do. So our cages are vertical, and they're 8 feet tall, and they're basically tiered. They have shelves every 2.5 feet or so, with a final shelf at the very top, about 6 inches, 8 inches from the roof. And they, whenever it rains, or as soon as you hear a thunder off in the distance, every monitor, all of them,
so cool,
way up to the top, and they lay out straight in a line and wait for it. I've got videos of it. I'm absolutely pouring. Now, all my monitors, and actually all my reptiles, have I put a subfloor in everything, so they can actually go under. They're underneath a wood, basically a deck that's screwed down. I can't even get in it unless I have to actually unscrew it, which is pretty difficult. And then on top of that, so they have a wood deck of 2-inch thick planks, and a hole they can go underneath there. Once they're under there, nobody's getting them out. And so they have the ability to go under there, and that's basically their safe spot. If they ever need to get away from bad weather, they have this. It's dry, and then on top of it, it's also covered usually with a layer of mulch or dirt, so it's really secure. And that's where I let them overwinter at night when it's cold and stuff like that. So I never bring them in. I use no supplemental heat, nothing.
Wow.
But they choose, even though it's pouring down rain, they all choose to go up there every day. So
so do you have visitors ever?
I'm sorry?
Do you welcome visitors? Like, could we come check your place out sometime?
Yes. If you guys get down here, you let me know.
All right, man. We'll do. I want to see that. Come during the rainy season.
I mean, it's Florida, so it's always the rainy season.
So I'm real curious, Ron. Like, I mean, obviously with the way you got stuff designed for the enclosures and stuff, man, it's like, I don't know, where did this gift come from, man? Like, where did you actually learn and discover, like, all right, this is what the monitor needs, or this is what this species needs for it to thrive in this kind of environment? But like, where did you discover that environment? Like, especially back in the day.
A lot of it, I mean, dude, I got like 30 some odd years of trial and error. So I've pretty much fucked everything up you could possibly do. And then I've had to fix it.
Facts.
I mean, it's just, it's a lot of that. I mean, I read a lot of research papers pretty much every, and it's from all over the map on herpetoculture. Like I'm a herpetological paper. So I spend a lot of time reading stuff that biologists have written and stuff like that. So I've done that. I have a ton of books. I've read pretty much every book on lizards particularly, but on a lot of other reptile species. And I also look to aquaculture for inspiration. I look to aviculture for inspiration. I've taken different things from each one of those. And a lot of it's just common sense. I mean, you think about think about your house is your secure space. Strangers just can't walk into your house and disturb you. When you go in your house, that's yours. You're in there and you're secure. Yeah. And I mean, animals need the same thing. So that's the idea behind the subfloor. Like even I cannot, even if I want to, it's not easy for me to go into that subfloor and fuck with them. So, once they're in there, that's theirs. Nobody comes in there. Nobody messes with it. I don't pull them out. I just leave them alone. When they come out on their own, they come out on their own. And that gives them that secure spot. And I think that kind of idea, which is much, you can do it in many simpler ways, obviously. The outdoor thing is that way. So God forbid, some like major, a tornado were to come through or, something bad. The cages that we construct are super sturdy, and then inside, I mean, I think those cages out there could survive a hurricane that the house could not.
Wow. There you go. It's pretty legit.
So anyway, my thinking is with that kind of stuff is I try to think about how we would relate, or even like a dog, a lot of people keep all their animals in like super bare cages, and that's cool. And if you're commercially doing stuff, that works. And that's what a commercial operation probably should do. But when I look at that, I think, well, what if I locked, myself or even my dog? What if I emptied everything out of a room and put him in that room and left him in there? I mean, how's he gonna, and I mean, reptiles obviously are different, but there's levels of security and things to stimulate them. And I mean, nobody wants to sit there and stare at 4 empty walls. So that's kind of my thinking with the way I design stuff. That's not a critique on the industry, by the way. Don't take it that way. I didn't mean it that way, but it's just my personal
the way you see it
towards that. And but it has allowed us to breed almost every species I've ever attempted, which has been a lot.
Yeah. Good stuff. Do you have a wrap-up question, Stephen or Desiree, for Ron?
I mean, I got a few more. Just touch back on the coneheads briefly. What's their egg-laying behavior? What do they do?
For the lace monitors?
The conehead lizards. The
coneheads.
Yes.
Generally, the females obviously become so gravid that you'll know when they are gravid. And then, so what I do is I have a potted plant, a large trunked potted plant. It's got like a 2-inch trunk, and then it has some big leaves on the top. But the reason for that is that you need to find a plant basically that has roots that are kind of like on a bulb, so you can. And what I do is I dump all of the potting soil out and I replace it with wet cocoa fiber, and I pack it back in there. And that creates the perfect nesting spot for these guys. And then they'll just come down at the base when they're ready, and they'll lay their eggs in there, and then you pull them out. And super easy, very simple, but you need to be able to do that so that every time you pull the plant out, you're getting the eggs out, but it's the kind of plant that won't die from being ripped out of the ground. So because you're pulling the whole bulb out and then you just repack it.
Okay.
So it works for anoles, it works for coneheads, and I basically have them set up exactly like the anoles.
Will they reabsorb if they don't have that ability to do that? Because like if we've never seen eggs out of like the last 3 years I've kept them,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if they were gravid, you would definitely know. I mean, females look like they're going to die when they're gravid. I mean, they get skinny, but bellies are huge, and you can see the eggs poking out of the sides. I mean,
okay, all right, yeah, I haven't got that far. I'm probably not hydrating them enough, is what it sounds like. So I'm going to work on that.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely triggered by rainfall. When we get super amounts of rainfall, they go into breeding behavior. When you don't, even modest daily rainfall isn't enough.
Okay.
So, but if you pop those in a rain chamber and you rain on them pretty hard for, several weeks, I think you'll
Yeah,
definitely trigger them.
for sure. Cool.
That seems to be the thing.
So the next question I had is kind of specific to our situation. So with our lace monitors, our female is a little over 2 years old. She's definitely like breeding age and size.
Mm-hmm.
The male's about 15 months old. He's a little bit smaller than her, not too significantly, probably like 3 months of good feeding. They'd be about the same size.
Right.
What should we do in our situation as far as breeding them goes?
Introducing them.
I mean, I would get them together and leave them together, and then target feed them.
Yeah.
One
Now?
thing, I'm sorry.
Like right now, get them together.
If it was me, yeah. That male is more than, if he's roughly 4 feet, which is what it sounds like.
Probably at 3 to 4, but yeah, close to 4.
Yeah, in general, younger males are better breeders than bigger ones. So I generally, I haven't personally bred lace yet myself, but I bred a lot of other species over the years, and generally males right around 12 months old, 15 months old, that's like perfect. So I think you have a pretty good shot if you get them together even now, because right now seems to be, at least for me, this is when they're really active in breeding.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think they're aware of each other because they're only separated, like their cages are next to each other, and they have been since we brought them home. And so there's just, one screen barrier between them. So I feel like it'd be a pretty good.
It's a little bit of a visual barrier. There's definitely smells going back and forth, and they can definitely see each other. It's just not super clear.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you first introduce them, you gotta watch it. They're oftentimes a little bit of chasing around, but as long as they're not hurting each other, just let them do their thing. And once you have them together, though, I don't separate unless I absolutely have to. And if you watch, like David Kirshner's videos down there in Australia with he's been breeding like the same pair in his house for like 20 years.
Wow.
And he keeps them together. He has the ability to separate them if he needs to, but it looks to me like he rarely does it. And it's really, with them, it's all about feeding. It's about really feeding the female hard and making sure she has as much food as she'll eat for usually 2 to 3 weeks. It'll kick them into, she'll swell up and get really big, and then she's starting to, she's forming eggs, and then it goes from there. And then as soon as they lay eggs, if you make sure she gets another 2 or 3 weeks of hardcore feeding, she'll lay again.
Wow.
They definitely can multi-clutch. Salvador can do the same thing.
Wow.
So, but it's just a matter of really getting they just need primo feeding, but you can't do that with the males, or they stop.
Yeah.
Lazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Wow. And then I gotta ask about these Spencer's monitors. They're incredible. Like,
they are. Yeah.
You said you had 7 of them.
Yeah, I have 7 of them. I have never seen those before. In the U.S., they were all produced by Don Church at Saurian Farms. These were the animals that I have are ones he produced, like, I guess 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
One of my investors owned a pair, and then my buddy Scott bought out John Egan's collection, which netted us another I got 1.2 from Ryan, and then 1.3 from Egan. So I have 2.5.
Wow.
That's sick.
And we've got them, I built a very long 16-foot enclosures for them, and it's basically like a little desert islands, and they're interesting. They're very prone to obesity. My buddy Ewan Edwards, who lives down in Australia, he's a longtime herper, but he was driving through their territory recently where they're found. He sent me a bunch of videos, and he's like, "This is where they live, and it's like total barren, just weeds and sand. I mean, it looks like brutal habitat." And it gets freezing in the wintertime, and in the summer it can get 122 degrees. So I've somewhat adapted the caging for that. So I hope I'm gonna produce some of those this year.
What's the timeline?
From what I understand, in the northern hemisphere, they generally breed honestly at the same time as the bearded dragons do. So right around February is when you kind of start to do stuff. So February, March, if I get lucky. The females are definitely big enough. As a matter of fact, that again, though, the problem with those, and most of the ones that I got were obese. I've had to have them on like serious diet because where they live is so sparse. Their metabolism just isn't like the more commonly kept monitors. So if you feed them high fatty diets like rodents and stuff, they get super obese super fast. So
Wow.
I'm basically only been feeding them like once every 3 or 4 weeks, and even then it's taken forever for them to drop enough weight to where I think they're now lean and mean enough to do the job. So I'm hoping that'll work. And then but it seems like they're primarily a lizard and insect eater from what I can gather. There's not really a lot of rodents where they're found and stuff like that. So right now I'm using chicks and a lot of super worms when I do feed them. God, feeding a 4-foot monitor super worms is an expensive deal, but and I actually started my own Discord roach colonies to be able to feed them, roaches and stuff. So they have a very small head, but very massive body and massive arms for digging, and they need deep substrate. I've given them a 3-foot deep sand area that's huge, like 2,000 pounds of sand for them to hopefully nest in. And so we'll see. I mean, I'm throwing everything I have at those projects. So I'm hoping that this will be the year that we produce, lace and Mertens and Spencers all at once.
So exciting, man. It's amazing. Yeah. Hit up Des.
It's my number on Facebook. You just
Hey, Ron, this has been an amazing hour and a half, man. I appreciate your time so much. We've learned a lot. I mean, I know I have a lot to take away from this episode for sure. And just I just want to say, keep it up, man. I mean, all I can say is I respect, what you've been doing from shit before even I was born, man. And that's really awesome to say because I'm fairly new to the hobby, but I'm very inspired, and having individuals like you on this show is definitely inspires me, and I know Desiree and Steven feel the same. So
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
yeah, so much.
If you guys are down here, you hit me up. I'll hook you up.
I will, man.
We will.
We gotta plan a Florida trip
Exactly.
now.
So,
all right, Ron, you be safe, man. You have a wonderful night, man, and we'll be in touch, man. Thank you again for your time.
thanks, you too, guys.
Awesome. Damn, good shit, man. Ron, that was pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how many times you guys, both of your guys' eyes lit up, and then you looked at each other, and you're like, "Oh shit!" Like it was kind of like you guys. It was kind of like you guys. It was light bulbs going off at the same time. But man, I was just excited for you guys.
Amazing.
This guy's really, really doing it, man, and he's doing it on so many different levels. Working with stuff that hardly anyone else. I mean, probably nobody's working with. So I don't know, man. Pretty exciting stuff. How do you guys feel?
His attitude about it too, because that was going to be my question, but he kind of already answered it, in the beginning, what he wants to tell people. And crickets.
We're listening. Go ahead. Oh, that's it. I'm done talking.
About like get into stuff that might not be around,
No,
much longer, and more conservation efforts on stuff versus
Did you say conservation?
I'm gonna say
instead of
Did you say conservation?
Bearded dragons.
Oh shoot! Hold on. Did you say conservation?
Somebody's knocking on my door.
Who's here?
What the fuck is that? Don't do that. The dogs will bark.
Are you gonna let me in or what?
Oh,
come on in, Carl.
Oh, he's
Yeah.
here.
Oh, yeah. Like, what do you expect? I'm gonna be here. Like, it's the end of the show. Carl gets his little block of time to talk about the most important things to talk about. Like, yeah, prioritize conservation of our world, prioritize that. I guess not, right?
What did you think of the show, Carl?
Like,
What did you think of the show, though? The guy was amazing.
Yeah, great show. Yeah, great. Yeah, good job, good interview, good guest. Like, great. Yeah, cool. And
you heard what his mission is.
He's on one today.
No, it's a great mission. How about more people just follow that? Like, oh, hey, I got my super chocolate lesser spinner Neuro 360 umbilical twist. Like,
oh my God. You said umbilical twist. Where'd you go? You can't leave.
Oh my God, Kush is strangling him.
Oh, he's back.
I mean, yay. Oh, my lemon frost developing tumors, like half dead. Come on.
What's a lemon frost?
It's a leopard gecko that was so hyped and big money, and then they're all defective.
The smoothie bearded dragons. How do you feel about those? Or those? What are those?
Oh yeah, bearded dragons. Like,
he's not coming to Arlington.
Breeding efforts make no difference on wild population.
Carl's not coming to Arlington, is he, Desiree? What are you doing about this?
I don't know, man. He just finds a way to be there no matter where he's
Carl
at.
is everywhere. Okay.
Oh my God, man! Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in. Please,
are you going to start keeping rare species now that have diminishing populations in the wild and are underrepresented in the captive hobby? Like, are you going to?
Please subscribe to the channel if you support it in any way. We appreciate all the viewers.
You don't support conservation of endangered species, so just say you hate them. I hate endangered species. Say that.
Say hi to us. If you see us at Arlington, come say what up. I might have some stickers for you guys. Maybe even a shirt.
I'm going to hi to Carl and get the real information.
Carl will not be
that matters. Yeah.
If you see Carl, you will not see me with Carl. I will not be with Carl whatsoever. That's not my.
Carl will be there, and whether you like it or not. Okay. You're